There are a lot of theories floating around about the Payday 2 secret, but they're mostly idle speculation based on unsubstantiated guesswork. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, you'll want to click this link to see the previous video in this series. If you're searching for cold, hard facts, however, too bad. We don't have any of those. In the 6 weeks since the game's release, we've discovered stone nothing. What we do have is the one thing that Bain has told us explicitly is related to the secret: the oddities from his guide. Now, my assumption is that these images are instructions telling us to go to a place in a job and do a thing, possibly while equipped with specific weapons and masks, and maybe even with certain skills spec'd. As we look at each of the images, we'll keep an eye toward where they might be telling us to go or what they might be telling us to do. Some of the speculation in this video is going to tend into the ridiculous, but I'm going to try to interpret every symbol we're given. In the last video, I mentioned the movie The Ninth Gate and the parallels that the movie's book The Nine Gates has with Bain's guide. Each copy of The Nine Gates bears 9 illustrations, 3 of which are signed LCF, while the remaining 6 are signed AT by the book's author Aristide Torchia. The movie's protagonist discovers that the illustrations signed AT are forgeries, and that once the original LCF signed version of each page is discovered, the pages can be used to perform a ritual that summons the devil, which is a thing that a person would want to do because reasons. The point is that just like the 9 Gates, Bain's guide bears 9 illustrations, 3 of which are signed BDN, while the remaining 6 are signed CGO by the book's author, Alessandro Cagliostro. The implication, then, would be that something is wrong or missing on the CGO pages. I'll point out the signatures on the pages as we look at them. Appearing on page 2 of the Bain's Guide PDF, the first illustration bears the title Codex Raptus, translating roughly to Book of Robbery. At the bottom of the page, the date 1792 is written in Roman numerals, significant because it is the year that Washington, D.C. was officially founded and the cornerstone of the White House was laid. The illustration has a lot of similarities to paintings of the resurrection of Christ, with the sepulchre, the figure emerging from it, and the figure lying on the ground nearby. Of course, there are some important differences, like the fact that our central figure probably isn't Jesus, or that his tomb is inexplicably filled with gold coins. And, of course, you've already noticed that one of these paintings of the resurrection appears larger than life in the meth house on day 1 of Rats. This page is signed CGO. So what might this picture be trying to tell us? One of the figures is wearing metal armor, perhaps indicating a requirement for the improved combined tactical vest granted by the Iron Man skill. The armored figure carries a torch. What could this represent? The only thing a player can carry that gives off light is a tack light attached to a gun, and nothing a player carries can burn. The figure carrying the bag wears a hooded cloak. Might this represent any particular skill or armor? The figure on the ground is unarmored and carrying a pretty weird-looking knife. The only thing approaching a melee weapon in the game is the power saw, and if that's what this is intended to be, then it's a pretty sad representation. If it's not the saw, though, what could it be? If the swords that we'll see throughout the guide are intended to be guns, perhaps the dagger is a pistol. This could be Bain. Since his face is shrouded, he's not near the action, and he's holding a flag, which might be representative of the objective markers he puts down for you. Also, the figure is wearing a cape, but hey, maybe Bain likes to wear capes. It's also possible that this figure is meant to be the operator of a getaway vehicle, and the flag is simply marking him as an objective. The tree in the upper left of this image has a strangely curved trunk, similar to the strangely curved trunk of this tree from Big Oil 2. And the 3 figures are shown finding gold while standing in the open with one bag a short distance away from a big castle, which could be a reference to hauling the fusion engine from the big villa out to the airstrip in order to claim your payment. The lit candle on the ground would then be the lit signal flare that calls in the helicopter, and the man with the flag could potentially be the helicopter pilot. The big problem with this interpretation of the image is that the scene clearly takes place at night, while Big Oil 2 occurs during the day. The other job that this might be is obviously Rats 1, given the connection with the painting in the meth house. Rats 1 does occur at night, and the moon is quite similar to the one from the image. The castle would then be the meth house, and the figures are probably meant to be out on the road away from the house. The candle and or the torch could then perhaps be the floodlight asset that you can buy, although that's not nearly as satisfying a parallel as the signal flare. I don't know what this tree would represent in that case, though. I've talked about the tomb full of coins as the payment for the job so far, but it's possible that it represents an actual cache of money or gold in a job. Unfortunately, that only narrows us down to the bank, framing frame 3, and every single job that contains at least one safe. One final note. If the parallel to the 9th gate really does mean that the pages signed CGO are off by one detail, it could be that the moon is that false detail on this page, which would mean that the Big Oil 2 theory works quite cleanly. Appearing on page 4 of Bain's guide, this illustration bears the chapter heading The Criminal Network. This image contains a number of the guide's recurring themes: swords, conspicuous oddly shaped trees, castles, and a man carrying a bag. This page is signed CGO. So what might this picture be trying to tell us? The most telling feature in this image is this clump of mushrooms. As far as I'm aware, mushrooms only appear in one map in the game, Big Oil 2, in the forest surrounding the airstrip. They cluster there in threes, just as in the image. There are two modes of aerial conveyance in the game: the ubiquitous helicopters belonging to both you and the police, and the planes from Big Oil 2 and Firestarter 1. The hot air balloon is almost certainly a stand-in for one of these. The man hauling the bag here wears a jester's cap and carries a sword. A fool with a jester's cap is a common sight on Joker playing cards, so this guy could be a mastermind with Joker. The sword could just represent a gun, but that leaves the question of why only some figures in the illustrations carry swords when all players carry guns. Might the sword be something more specific? It's also worth noting that the Fool from the Fool Tarot card is usually depicted wearing a jester's cap and carrying a bag, which I mention only because there is some tarot-related imagery in the upcoming illustrations. The banner flying from this tower bears a symbol that looks like a hash sign missing its top white quadrant, though it's possible that this is intended just to be shading on the banner rather than a symbol. In either case, the fact that this castle has a banner on top is somewhat conspicuous. Several buildings in the game are capped with antennae made up of straight lines at right angles, which might be what the hash pattern refers to. Also, the mall in Mall Crasher and most of the buildings in Diamond Store have actual banners hanging from the front. Most interesting to me, however, is the windsock on Firestarter 1. As you approach the airfield, the Mendoza's airplane takes off, creating an image with a pretty similar composition to our illustration. The hole in this interpretation, of course, is that there don't appear to be any mushrooms anywhere on Firestarter 1. This tree has an unusual shape, but I haven't seen any tree in the game that looks like it. It's possible that this is not a clue and is instead just a tree. I bring it up mostly due to the number of strange trees and plants that appear throughout these illustrations. My leading guesses for this picture are Big Oil 2 due to the mushrooms, or Firestarter 1 due to the banner and aircraft. The fact that this page is signed CGO might again mean that some detail in it is a red herring, and the mushrooms could be that detail. It also might be Rats 2, with a player bringing a bag of coke to the deal for intel, which takes place in front of a tall building with an antenna on top. Appearing on page 9, this illustration bears one of the most baffling collections of symbols to be found in the guide. The large central tree is positively festooned with weird crap. This page is signed CGO. So, what might this picture be trying to tell us? The tree with the floating crown at its top might be a reference to the Tree of Life from the Kabbalah. The 10, or 11 sometimes, circles that make up the Tree of Life are called Sephiroth, and the topmost of the Sephiroth is Keter, which means crown in Hebrew. Interestingly, Keter can also be translated as to wait or to surround. That said, I have no idea what this being the Tree of Life could possibly mean. If we assume that the other symbols in the image are meant to relate to the positions of the Sephiroth, then that makes the lantern either wisdom or mercy, the arrow either beauty or knowledge, the guy with the spyglass probably severity, and the burning chest either foundation or kingdom. None of this makes very much sense. This lantern, containing a key instead of a flame, is one of the most blatant symbols to be found in the guide. This could be telling us that the flickering lights are key to discovering something, or perhaps that some other light that we haven't paid much attention to is important. The other thing that this lantern might be is the power room on the roof of Firestarter 3. It is the key to being able to open the vault, and there's obviously some association between light and controlling the flow of electricity. This connection is a bit tenuous, but it's strengthened by the fact that the lantern is above a cache of burning treasure, which seems like a pretty direct reference to Firestarter 3. Speaking of burning treasure, there are a surprising number of ways to burn valuable things in this game. If the treasure chest immersed in flames isn't a reference to Firestarter 3's burning pile of money, other possibilities are destroying the weapons on Firestarter 1, blowing up the meth lab on Rats 1, allowing the intelligence to be burned on Rats 2, or burning stores full of valuables in Mall Crasher. However, since the chest is closed and apparently unharmed by the fire, it might instead be that the fire is intended as some sort of protection against the treasure being stolen, in which case pretty easy parallels can be drawn with the electrified vault door on Firestarter 3, the alarm blocking the entrance to the vault on Framing Frame 3, or the C4 on the bus in Rats 3. This figure's spyglass might mark him as a lookout, meaning that he's a guard. It could also be a player looking through a scope. His hat is a bit unusual, and the feather here may be meant to evoke the phrase, "a feather in one's cap," meaning that he has accomplished something, or more literally, that he has killed someone. Perhaps it's an instruction to kill some particular NPC and then look for something, but we'd need to know what we were looking for that to be useful. There are not a ton of things that relate to arrows in the game. If this tree is indeed meant to be the tree of life, then this is one hell of a metaphorical arrow. Honestly, I just don't know what to make of this. The image seems most likely to me to either be Firestarter 3 due to the key lantern and the burning treasure, or Rats 3 with the FBI guards watching over a bus full of money protected by traps. In any case, I don't have any convincing interpretation for the crowned tree. Appearing on page 13, this illustration makes direct references to the Rider-Waite tarot deck. It's also one of the simplest images, but that doesn't make it any less cryptic or confusing. This image is signed BDN. So what might this image be trying to tell us? The big central contraption here has characteristics of both a bow drill and a pump drill, primitive hand-operated drilling devices. It's not difficult to guess what that might refer to. Interestingly, bow and pump drills can also be used to start fires, making this device a literal fire starter. The sun and moon appear here in the sky looking exactly as they do in the Rider-Waite tarot deck. This could be a reference to Watch Dogs or Firestarter, as those heists both have a map that occurs during the day and a map that occurs during the night. The sun card traditionally represents enthusiasm, creativity, success, prosperity, and apparently every other good thing ever. The moon, on the other hand, traditionally represents lunacy, dreams, plots, creativity again, psychic revelations, and 100 other things. Basically, the symbolism of the tarot is so loose that you could make the cards mean just about anything. The Wheel of Fortune here is once again taken directly from the Rider-Waite tarot deck. 4 spokes of the wheel are inscribed with the letters T-A-R-O, which can be read both as tarot and as rota, which is Latin for wheel. These spokes are also inscribed with alchemical symbols for mercury, sulfur, water, and a circle. This could be gold, with the center dot obscured by the spoke line. Atop the other 4 spokes are stylized versions of the Hebrew characters that spell Yahweh. The Wheel of Fortune card represents change and obviously the intercession of random chance. I have no idea what it might mean in regard to Payday. A single tombstone sits in the background. This could mean that a particular important NPC has to die, or perhaps that one of the heisters has to be taken into custody. As far as I know, there aren't any tombstones or graveyards in the game. The castles that frame the image might be significant as well. The image could be telling us that we need to deploy the drill in an unusual location. and these castles may represent surrounding buildings that will help us figure out the drill location. It's also worth noting that their positions are mirrored by these flanking buildings on the Rider-Waite Moon card. This page seems to me to be about Firestarter, due to the fire-starting device and the sun and moon, and my feeling is that it's directing us to place the thermal drill in Day 3 somewhere unusual after meeting some condition. Appearing on page 21, this illustration features Justice, a night sky, and a really suspiciously high sewer grate. This image is signed BDN. So what might this image be trying to tell us? First of all, there's a big conspicuous Roman 4 here. Rather than a reference to anything in the game, I think this actually could be used for ordering the images. It could be that the 9 illustrations are instructions that have to be carried out in some order, and if that's the case, then we'd need signifiers to tell us the order. Obviously, the other images haven't had great big numbers in them, but some of the signifiers could be more subtle than that. That said, keep an eye out for 4s while playing. This 3-barred drainage grate is strangely high off the ground. It seems like this could be a reference to Framing Frame 2, where a grate can be cut, leading to a fairly long fall into a sewer. It's also possible that this could be a reference to the high-up shootable grate on the Diamond Store map. The other thing it makes me think of is the fact that water can be seen streaming down the walls in certain locations, such as this wall on Rats 1, and the wall of the basement on Nightclub. This version of the Lady Justice figure notably does not match the one from the Rider-Waite tarot card, although her sword does appear to be the same one. The appearance of Justice could refer to a lot of things in a game about professional bank robbers having gunfights with cops, but there is one very direct connection: the statue of Lady Justice that appears in the safe house. Her sword arm is missing, apparently broken off by Dallas while moving her in, and the phrase "Justice is done" appears on the base. Also, she has Doris carved into her robe. These details are unlikely to be related to the secret, though, as they're all probably just someone at Overkill inexplicably fanboying out about Metallica. Metallica's 4th album is called And Justice for All, and the phrase "Justice is done" is a lyric from the titular song. The tour that Metallica went on to promote the album was called the Damaged Justice Tour, explaining the broken arm, and the concert's stage show involved a giant blind justice prop that the band nicknamed Doris. These 3 6-pointed stars mark a nighttime scene, but one wonders why they use stars to represent this instead of the moon used to signify night in the earlier images. I have not yet seen a nighttime job where the moon is not visible. Maybe there's one where there are drifting clouds and you need to wait for the clouds to occlude the moon before doing something. There is a star card in the tarot, but these stars don't look anything like the Rider-Waite star. This scrawny plant is kind of an odd detail. It's possible that it's meant to represent the prevalence of waist-high scrawny foliage on Framing Frame 2. My guess is that this image represents Framing Frame 2, and the blind justice represents the police being unaware of your activities, meaning that you stealthed Day 1 and then controlled the construction workers before they could call the cops. The 4 might then mean that you have 4 bags, and its position may mean that you take them into the sewers. I'm not sure what else it could be instructing you to do, though. This image, appearing on page 43 of the guide, is absolutely packed with stuff. If you need to go to the bathroom or get a drink or something, this would probably be a good time to pause and go do that, because we're going to be here for a while. On this page, we find Bain's note telling us that these illustrations have some significance, so this image and those following may bear some extra scrutiny. This is the last of the BDN images. So, what might this image be trying to tell us? The Roman 3 on this book might be for ordering the images, as I mentioned in the last illustration. It could also be meant to evoke the flammable liquid side from Firestarter 1, as there are several other things in the image that refer to fire. It could conceivably even be about finding 3 books in the safe deposit boxes in the bank vault. Strangely enough, the figure isn't holding the book, but rather carrying it with a shoulder strap like a messenger bag, the same way that player characters carry their deployables. Given the various alchemical stuff surrounding him, The figure's triangular necklace may well be meant to be the common alchemical symbol for fire. I touched on the jobs that contain significant amounts of fire earlier, and this could be a call out to any one of those. What on earth is this supposed to be? It appears to be floating above his head, whatever it is. It could be a stylized flame, meant to symbolize that he's having an idea or an epiphany. Or it could be meant to evoke the question mark or exclamation point that appears over a person's head when they become aware of you. This skull might have a bullet hole in it, once again indicative of the importance of killing some particular important person. The other possibility is that this hole is the result of trepanning, because the book is supposed to have been written in 1792, and obviously drills are a thing of some importance in this game. What would that mean in the context of the game, though? A die laying on the ground with the one side facing up, the 3 side facing the viewer, and the 2 sides shaded but visible. This is a really conspicuous and weird thing, but I just have no idea what it could possibly mean. Like the appearance of the Wheel of Fortune, this obviously calls out to random chance. Maybe it refers to the Payday card drop system in some way, or to some element of a job that only appears in some of that job's variations. This is a weird-looking rug. Look at it. Look how weird it is. It has too much strange detail on it to be nothing. Maybe it's a reference to these weird rugs, which are conspicuous in their own right due to their connection to the Overdrill puzzle. Alright, this is the heavy part. Before I start in on the symbols, I want to point out that I realize that it's possible these symbols don't mean anything, and they're just here to make us draw the conclusion that because there's all this alchemy crap on the wall, this guy must be an alchemist. If they are meaningful, though, obviously we need to know what they're trying to tell us. So, from the top. The first symbol is most likely salt. The salt symbol is usually drawn with only 1 bar across it, but it may be that these 2 lines are intended to be the outline of a single bar. In any case, I've not been able to find any source that lists any other alchemical meaning for a circle with 2 horizontal lines through it. Now, salt is particularly significant in alchemy as it is one of Paracelsus's 3 primes, and is said to be the base matter from which all solidity arises, contrasted with sulfur, which gives rise to flame, and mercury, which is the source of all fluidity. Salt appears in the game in the form of table salt in restaurants and cafes, as well as less directly in Rats 1, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The symbol for mercury appears next. Mercury appears in the game as a mask material, and it makes your masks look pretty smooth. This could be the mathematical approximately equals symbol. If it isn't, it's probably a very short version of the symbol for water, or a process symbol meaning to cook or boil. It also means alternating current when used in an electrical context. This is the symbol for gold. Gold appears in the game and its prequel both in bar form and as a mask material. Taking the middle symbol here as approximately equals, and remembering that the Overdrill puzzle required everyone in the crew to wear gold masks, this might be telling us that unlocking this game's secret requires mercury masks. If the mercury here does not refer to the mask material, but is instead symbolic of something else in the game, this line might then be telling us that that thing is valuable to figuring the secret out. On the next line, partially obscured by the edge of the frame, is the Libra symbol, which in alchemy stands for the process of sublimation. Sublimation is the transition of a substance from solid to gas without passing through an intermediate liquid phase. I don't think we have an example of anything subliming in this game, unless something that happens during the meth cook on Rats 1 counts. Following that is lead. The only lead in the game that I'm aware of is in the bullets, but obviously bullets are pretty important. Maybe this refers to ammo bags. This is similar to this uncommon variation of the mercury symbol. However, I think it looks more like a stick figure drawing of a guy with his hands up, which may imply either forcing a particular civilian to surrender or some use of the Dominator skill. The first symbol on the final line means ammonia or ammonium salts, in particular one known as sal ammoniac, more commonly called ammonium chloride. Ammonium chloride has been used as a throat medicine, a baking additive, and a component in Leclanche cells, a form of early battery. Ammonium chloride is also used in one of the more common processes for producing methylamine, which any fan of Breaking Bad will know is a vital part of the P2P method of cooking methamphetamine. Interestingly, Wikipedia indicates that sal ammoniac is mostly formed through sublimation around volcanoes, and was written about by Pliny the Elder, who died in the violent volcanic explosion of Pompeii that gave rise to the term Plinian eruption, to which we have a mysterious reference in Big Oil 2. The final symbol on the paper is a triangle circumscribing a square circumscribing a circle. When circumscribed by another circle, it becomes the symbol for the process of creating a philosopher's stone. This process is known as the magnum opus. The philosopher's stone is well known for its ability to turn lead into gold, but it was also said to grant immortality, heal all forms of illness, bring dead plants back to life, create glass that you can mold in your hands like clay, transmute random crystals into precious gemstones, and allow lamps to burn eternally. Basically, it could do damn near anything. Now, there are no literal philosopher's stones in the game, obviously, but the process of turning useless material into something very valuable has an obvious analog in the cooking of meth in Rats Day 1, while the production of a material that allows lamps to burn eternally is paralleled by Rossi's research into fusion energy in Big Oil. One final note. The paper contains the symbol for salt and maybe the symbol for water. Combined, these might be a call-out to Rats 1. The cook process on Rats 1 combines muriatic acid, also known as hydrochloric acid, with hydrogen chloride and caustic soda, which is also known as sodium hydroxide. In the real world, combining these chemicals in the right amounts would produce not meth, but basically salt water. As a whole, the scene seems like a reference to either Rats 1 or Big Oil 2. If it's rats, the alchemist represents the cooks who work the magic of turning the common chemicals into meth worth well more than its weight in gold. The symbols on the wall make mention of the value of the finished product, as well as some of the ingredients in both the real recipe and the comically false recipe presented by the game. This theory, though, doesn't explain the fact that the figure is writing, and that he seems to have written quite a lot already. If it's Big Oil, then the figure is the scientist Rossi looking to create cheap and plentiful energy. Elements of the image refer to things that can be found around his villa, including Rossi's scribbled notes. The book, then, might represent the crumpled notes that he has jammed into the pockets of his lab coat, which may turn out to be important. Unfortunately, this theory doesn't explain most of the symbols on the wall. Even more unfortunately, neither of those theories explain the skull with the hole in it or the dye on the floor. There's clearly something important about this image that I'm still not seeing. Appearing on page 44, this is the most obviously allegorical and also silliest illustration in the book. This image is signed CGO. So what might this image be trying to tell us? First of all, this chessboard is laid incorrectly by 90 degrees. A black square should be in the lower left corner of the board. If the position of the pieces on the board turns out to be a pattern that needs to be transposed onto something else, for example the safe deposit boxes in the bank, rotating the pattern by 90 degrees first may be necessary. The pieces remaining seem to be the white king, the black king, and either a black rook or a black bishop. Death is probably playing black. If the second black piece is a rook, this is an impending victory for black in about a dozen moves. If it's a bishop, white plays to a draw. This horseshoe could be a reference to the Lucky Charm skill, or it could just be another call-out to random chance like the Wheel of Fortune or the Alchemist's Die. There's certainly plenty of death in the game, and we have multiple other references to death throughout the guide. Those references are all to death as an event, though, and, more to the point, as an event in the past. This death is more sinister, more impending. You can even see his influence on the surroundings, as this is the only image where the background buildings are crumbling and in disrepair. The state of the buildings could imply that this is the final image, if it is indeed the case that the images are intended to be followed in a particular order. Death is frequently depicted with this depleted hourglass, of course signifying that time is up and you're going to die, and, the Reaper's kind of a drama queen. In game terms, the only timer whose countdown is bad for the player is the getaway timer on escape missions. Perhaps we're supposed to wait out the timer on some escape, or maybe just get away at the last moment. The word mendax, carved into these gallows, is Latin for lying, cheating, deceitful, or false. It could imply that the death is a false one, that perhaps something we expect to kill a player, like a long fall, will turn out to be safe. It could also apply to the scene as a whole, implying that the interpretation we develop of the image is the opposite of the truth. If we interpret the gallows as a game of hangman and the letters MENDAX as misses, the only job name that we can still spell is Big Oil. Of course, if there were 6 misses, we'd expect to see a body in the noose, but maybe we're cheating, as implied by Mendax, or maybe the Reaper is too concerned with looking sweet and ominous to learn the rules of the game. It's also possible that Mendax indicates a pattern of safe deposit boxes that must be opened in the bank's vault, since the columns of boxes go from A to X. What is Death standing on? Is it a trap door, a piece of paper, a plank of wood? It could be a reference to the sewer grate in Framing Frame 2, the door to the basement on Big Oil 2, or the trap door that you can cut in the bottom of the truck on Watch Dogs 1. Unfortunately, the chessboard, gallows, and broken down buildings are all difficult to match to elements of the game. The combination of Mendax and the CGO signature also make it difficult to know what details of the image can be believed. On the whole, this is one of the more baffling images. Appearing on page 45, this image is the simplest one in the book. To the surprise of absolutely no one, that hasn't made it any easier for us to get anything out of it. This page is signed CGO. So what might this image be trying to tell us? This fellow is standing around not looking particularly criminal, but his shadow is carrying a bag that is presumably filled with loot. This could be a reference to casing mode, where random civilians see you as one of them while you are secretly a big scary criminal. The fact that the sword is in the ground instead of the figure's hand might also be a reference to the fact that you don't openly carry your gun in casing mode. If it's not that, perhaps it's meant to be a weapon lying on the ground somewhere. The only place I can think of anything like that is the tricked-out car 4s on the ground floor of Rossi's villa in Big Oil 2. It's also possible that it's meant to be a weapon dropped by a slain policeman or security guard. What is this paper meant to be? Where in the game do people hold papers? I'm sure I sound like a broken record, but I immediately think of Rossi and all the notes he has jammed into his pockets. It's also conceivable that this could represent the vaguely paper-shaped key cards, in which case this figure could be the bank manager from the Harvest and Trustee Bank or the manager of the Tasteful Club. I suppose it's even possible that he could be the mobster who sometimes carries the keycard in the nightclub. A tiny bit of foliage creeps in from the top of the frame, like the low branches of a tree hanging over the wall. This could be a reference to any job where there are trees near a building, which is quite a few. This image gives us very little to go on, which is disappointing, but at least helps to keep us from going too far afield in its analysis. I think this could be about Big Oil 2, just due to the discarded sword, but that's a conclusion that I've drawn a lot. It might just be that Big Oil is packed with so many unusual things that the odd stuff in the guide will tend to have more parallels there than anywhere else. The final illustration appears on page 46. This one is actually far less allegorical than most of them, depicting a criminal suffering in prison for his crimes. This image is signed CGO. So, what might this image be trying to tell us? This is the first time that we see a figure wearing a mask, clearly marking him as a thief. He's clutching the chain that runs to his leg irons, and I have no idea what that could represent. The fact that he's in prison may refer to the game's custody mechanic. The prisoner has marked 5 hash marks on one wall and 32 on the other. This could refer to something that happens at 5:32 on the mission clock, or 5 minutes and 32 seconds after some triggering condition has been met. It could also be a reference to groupings of objects, 5 of one thing and 32 of another, if such groupings exist anywhere. A shoot of green life pokes through the floorboards here. I've not seen weeds or plants coming through floorboards on any job, but there is an abundance of weedy growth on some jobs like Framing Frame 2. If this isn't meant to be literal plant life growing through a floor, then I'm not really sure what it could be. The prisoner is being either offered or threatened with a noose. I have absolutely no idea what this could represent. If we can figure out what the gallows in the Mendax image are meant to be, it may help us figure out what this noose means. The window here has 3 bars and looks a bit like the grate that the water pours through in the Blind Justice image. It's hard to tell if we're seeing the sun or a full moon through it, though. I'm guessing it's the sun, because I think if it was the moon, they would use a crescent moon to avoid ambiguity as they did in the first illustration. If so, that at least narrows down the number of jobs this might refer to. I'm not too big a man to admit I have no idea what's going on here. I feel less sure of this image than any of the others, and I haven't satisfactorily connected any element of it to anything in the game. There's one more bit of strange art in the guide. On page 19, between a note about visibility and a note about masks, we can spy a bit of an etching or a sketch or something. It turns out to be a section of the etching The Fall of the Giants by the Italian painter and printmaker Salvatore Rosa. The image depicts the collapse of a structure being built by giants for the purpose of climbing into the heavens. At the bottom is inscribed a quote from the poet Claudian, which translates roughly to, "He is raised aloft, that he may be hurled down in more headlong ruin." This quote is from his screed In Rufinum, a scathing takedown of the powerful statesman Rufinus. The most obvious example of a powerful figure being brought low in the game is the senator being framed in Framing Frame. It's possible, however, that the appearance of this etching isn't part of the puzzle at all, and that it's just here to be a period-appropriate detail in the guide. As you can see, we've got more than enough clues to keep us running in circles for months. We still haven't managed to connect anything concretely to an element of the game, though. If we could just crack one clue, get one provable connection, it would help us to solidify so much of our speculation about the form of the puzzle and the relationship between the illustrations in the game. If you've got any theories or just a desire to participate in the search, check out the links in the description below. And until next time, keep your eyes open.